Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightmare's Edge. Today we are heading back to one of my favorite subjects, cryptids. There are some frightful stories out there about these creatures all over the planet, but I was lucky enough to find some on Reddit, and the authors have allowed me to read. I will link their Reddit handles and the links to their stories in the description below. Be sure to check them out and comment. If you have a story of your own you'd like to submit, you can email it to me, which is also going to be listed in the description. Now sit back, relax, and let me tickle those inner fears. Today's first story comes to us from Lay_DE, entitled, Driving Around and Ended Up Seeing a Vampire Beast. I have a few paranormal and cryptid stories after moving to North Carolina. The silver UFO, the shadow person, the six lights, etc. Please let me know if you would like to hear them. But this one stuck out to me the most. I have never even heard of this thing, or even knew that it existed, and I was a kid when I saw this thing. It could have been my mind exaggerating, but another person with me saw it, and it freaked us both out. Driving along the old back roads of North Carolina, we were learning the shortcuts and the ways to get around as we just moved there. It was the evening, as it was around fall summertime. The time where it's hot randomly in the springtime, so the windows were rolled down, just having fun cruising and sightseeing. The other person with me, let's call her M, was driving and was chit-chatting to me about the smells and plants I should stay away from. We were passing a cow farm, so we rolled our windows up, because it smelled and the curve past the farm was coming, so we rolled them back down. Now, after you hit this curve, there's a hill and it flattens out into a straight but crummy road. In the middle of the road, something blackish was walking in the middle of the street. It was shaggy and was walking all calm as if it had been sightseeing too. I remember M saying, "What is this dog doing?" It looked as big as a black bear or a derpy St. Bernard, and it walked with a normal stride. We slowly crept up on it, hoping that it would hear the car and move out of the way, but it didn't. So M gave the horn a little tap, and this thing finally turned around. Its eyes were reflected from the headlights. It hunched down and hissed. When it turned, its tail lifted and it was long and black. It then darted off into the woods. M was puzzled. I just sat there in disbelief in what I just witnessed. It was an odd, quiet ride back home. Fast forward more than a decade later, a few friends were looking at a local urban legend because one of them swore up and down they saw the ghost everyone was talking about and wanted to know more about it. I'm zoning out because I'm an introvert and went looking around in the website that we found. And I see this title called The Vampire Beast of North Carolina and was like, the fuck? North Carolina got a hillbilly vampire? I clicked on it and read it. Some beast was terrorizing locals and their farm animals, leaving puncture wounds, no blood, and leaving the body there. Multiple bodies of dead animals in one night, all dead the same way. I scoffed and said El Chupacabra, like Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory, and kept scrolling. I read some more and saw, here's what the witness recounts seeing. And when I scrolled down to see a hand-drawn picture of it, I nearly shat bricks. The eyewitness drawn photo of what they saw looked exactly what I saw with M over a decade ago. The shape, the tail, the color. I went pale and exited out and just sat there thinking of my life's existence of this point, or if I had some sort of brain damage. Because I was like, this cannot be real, what I saw. But what really hit the nail on the coffin is that this thing was attacking people's farm animals, and I saw this thing by a cow farm. I haven't seen this beast again. I really don't want to because I think it's a bad omen, since I have a superstitious family, which is why I think paranormal and odd occurrences happen to us. On the softer levels, nothing evil. When they do have an odd experience, we don't speak about it to each other, but I'll gladly let you guys hear the stories. To help make this story non-scary, I'll call the thing Hillbilly Cat. Maybe it was looking for some moonshine or banjo. Our second story comes to us from Damon687, entitled, My Skinwalker Experience. Buckle up, Buttercup, this is a long ride. It was only a few years ago in the spring, summer. I live in Utah and loved exploring with my ex-wife and stepson. We did a lot of geocaching around Utah to keep the stepson entertained. He was still pretty young, like 5, and it gave my ex and I the opportunity to see what all Utah has to offer. We also made sure that at least once a month, she and I would go away somewhere and camp, hike, explore. You get the idea. So during one of our trips, it happened to fall on the weekend where my ex had her son, and I had gotten off work early on that Friday. And so we made a last-minute plan to drive down to Monument Valley and camp out there, and then do some hiking in the morning. We left that afternoon and didn't get down there until a little after midnight. There were no clouds in the sky, no major light pollution, and stars as far as your eyes could see. Side note, if you haven't spent time far, far away from the cities, you will be surprised at how much light pollution prevents you from seeing. We checked with a hotel that is right at the rim of the overlook of Monument Valley, but they were a little too pricey for us. So we pulled off the main road where there's this old, really deserted parking area that made a semicircle as it jutted off the main road. Completely surrounding that semicircle of red sand and carports were miles of sagebrush, rocks, etc. There were no paths exiting the semicircle. Remember this part. We pulled in and had the headlights of the car facing the tent that faced the road. We laid down our tarp, set up the tent, got all cozy in a sleeping bag. We had that too that zipped into one massive sleeping bag and went to sleep. Right around 3 a.m. I get nudged awake by my ex asking, "Did you hear that?" To which I said, "No." And that's when I heard 2 things outside the tent. I completely froze up because then I saw my ex-wife's face and it put chills down my spine. She had apparently been awake for about 10 minutes before me because she had heard those things fighting. When I finally realized what was going on, that's when I heard them fighting too. It sounded like 2 dogs the size of bears slugging it out. Like they made noises that I'll never forget. Like the deepest, guttural, dog-like human growl or gnashing of teeth. The 2 things I presume heard me loosen my buck knife that I always kept under the pillow, because they immediately stopped fighting and started running around the tent. I could hear their deep breaths and powerful feet hitting the ground. Then they immediately sprinted off towards the road. Remember where the car was facing? Sagebrush to the east of the sand, semicircle, main road to the west, and started attacking each other. That's when I heard a horse snorting roughly 3 feet from my head. I hadn't heard a horse walk up or make any noises. It was suddenly just there. You know that feeling you get when you just know someone is looking at you, even though you can't see them? It was that, plus this overwhelming sense of dread and sheer terror. Well, even though it was spring, summer, we left the rain fly on just in case of a random spring storm. So I couldn't see through it, nor did I want to even move because I was afraid that it would try to get inside the tent. So I slowly unsheathed my knife and turned on my back, and that's when I heard this horse trying to open my car doors. I could hear it snorting like a horse does randomly as it flicked my door handles. I could hear it start at the passenger door, then working its way around, flicking each door handle until it got around the vehicle twice. Once it gave up on the doors, it came to the tent. Here's where I accepted that we were going to die. I've had some paranormal stuff happen to me that just spooked me. I've seen scary movies, etc., etc. But I've never been so scared that I literally felt as the will to stay alive just leave. I had accepted that this evil was here to kill me, my ex-wife, and my stepson. Words seriously cannot explain how much dread was in the air. It was so heavy and drowning. After what felt like an eternity, the horse got up, walked away from my tent towards the east, towards the sagebrush, and the dog things had left. That was it. Nothing. So, at first light, as I did not sleep for several hours after the encounter, my ex and I immediately opened the tent and started looking around at what was outside. I saw hoof prints around the car, and then they led to the sagebrush and literally disappeared. Like there were 0 tracks of any horse once the footprints entered the sagebrush. We found the dog thing tracks, and then she and I both saw that they were indeed not dog tracks. The dog prints they left in the sand were about the size of my shoe, size 11.5 American. These were unnaturally large. I've seen bear prints this size, but on dogs, hell no. So we packed up and got the fuck out of there as soon as we had everything torn down. We snapped a couple photos and then immediately took off. Paranormal shit like that makes me real nervous because the feeling of evil will never go away. Plus, after talking to my Navajo buddy, he told me I encountered a skinwalker, so fuck that noise. Our third story comes to us from Tank MM90, entitled Bird-Like Creature in Northwestern New York. Back in 2010 or 2011, I was a medvac crew chief based in Fort Drum, New York. We would regularly do training flights at night to keep current with NVGs. One particular night we had a flight around 10 or 11 p.m., and by the time we were done for the night, it was closer to 1 a.m. My car was having some issues, so the other crew chief offered to drive me home so I wouldn't have to wait on a cab. I happened to live maybe 10 minutes away, which took us off base through a mile of small town, some woods, then open fields to my place. I have made this drive tons of times and never had anything out of the ordinary happen until that night. As we reached the edge of the small town, I noticed a figure in the road near an intersection just sort of stand up and turn toward us. Despite the headlights being on, all I could see was this black figure with wings that extended past both sides of the road, take off in a blink of an eye. As we get to the stop sign, my friend stops, wide-eyed, and quickly asks, "Did you just..." The only response I had was, "So I'm not crazy." We drove the rest of the way in silence and didn't discuss it at all until the next day. To this day, we still don't know what we saw. 1. Neither of us have ever seen a bird that large in the area before. 2. We have never seen a bird take off as fast as this one did. Our last story comes to us from StatsLmao, entitled, There's Something That Has Followed My Family for 6 years. I have recently moved a few minutes away from our old house in rural Illinois. My old house is situated on a farm with 40 acres of land. Me and my sister had our fair share of creepy and maybe paranormal happenings, but nothing this bad, and I'm afraid that whatever lived on our property there has followed us to our new house. Backstory: my sister takes one of our dogs out to check on our horses in the paddock because they were making noise. She says she hears something behind her and turns around to see an 8-foot plus unnaturally skinny thing with antlers. She had said she fell on the ground and was paralyzed with fear. As she was laying there, the dog, who will cower at anything, goes into a full tack mode and starts to go crazy. At that point, I ran outside with my aunt and we see her on the ground, no ungodly being. I was very skeptical until 2 months later. I got to my friend's house who lives right down the road on Halloween for a sleepover, and he shows me 2 videos from his security camera. The first showed a pale arm hanging over their front porch. The second showed a finger touching the lens of the camera and a long arm reaching up. Something to keep in mind is that the deck where the camera is situated is around 12 feet above ground. In the middle of all this, his parents see what we are doing and get super mad and scold him about how these videos were not to be shown to anyone. They then went into the other room and the rest of the sleepover went normal, without anything of that nature happening again. But that is what kind of kickstarted my paranormal and cryptid craze. Present day, as of about 2 months ago, I had a dream where I was with my dad, sister, and friends going to an old amusement park of sorts. The place was indoors with the exception of the paintball area outside, and had a jungle gym, arcade, birthday rooms, etc. This place had been shut down for years, and in the dream, it looked way more dilapidated than what it looks like in real life. When we parked the car, my vision zooms in on the roof, and it has a deer with blood all over it. The deer appeared to be dead and lying there. We get closer to the building, and my vision zooms up to the sign, and now the deer is staring at me with a gigantic smile, full of human teeth and saliva dripping down onto the pavement. At this point, I am a bit unnerved, but we still went inside. The inside of this place looked just how it did when I was a kid, with everything in perfect condition. I turned my back on the group for maybe 10 seconds to look at the prizes they had, and when I turned back, the whole place turns into what it looked like on the outside. Everything is rotting and no lights, except for one. One single light shining on my group. The people I thought were my friends and family were now gray and pale, black eyes with blood coming out of their mouth, and pointing at me with a blank expression. The deer comes behind them and they all, including the deer, start saying, "Let death erupt. You're going to die. You're going to die with your eyes wide open." It started as a whisper and upped in volume until they were practically screaming. I woke up, but right before, I hear the deer say one thing that I still have imprinted in my brain. "Remember me." I had the same dream last night and nothing changed except the deer. It had grown around to what I think is about double its old size. Tonight, I went out to lock up our chicken coop and I was walking back inside and heard, "Remember me?" And shortly after, "Come closer. I told you. Remember me." The voice sounded like me, but had an odd and sinister undertone. It sounded like an impressionist who tried to impersonate me but had smoked for 30 years. Very raspy and false. This leads me to right now. Nothing else has happened, and it all stopped the second I got inside. I've told nobody. I will not tell anybody. If anyone has any idea what this is, tell me. Thank you for reading. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Now, while these are enjoyable to hear, these are actual situations that happen to these people. So if you happen to have any information that could help them or help them understand, please pass that along to them. Again, their information is going to be listed in the description. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, please contact me and I will reach out to them with any information that you have. But thank you again, authors, for allowing me to read your stories. Until next time, remember, just because you couldn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't watching you.